So this is a topic that's really, just for me personally, is what I'm really interested in. And briefly, could you guys just talk about what you do, what your organizations do in context of the voter journey and the voter life cycle?
Absolutely. My name is Erica Arbetter. I am with the American Action Network and Congressional Leadership Fund. So we are a two-pronged organization. On the American Action Network side, we do legislative advocacy. So we are very closely tied to the House leadership, and whatever the speaker is pushing is really what we're advocating for. So in terms of 2017, that was tax reform. And then for 2018, on the Congressional Leadership Fund side, we'll be doing the midterms almost exclusively. So we did the special elections last year, and we're doing Pennsylvania now, and gearing up for all those fun races to come.
And I'm Morgan Finkelstein. I'm the press secretary at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. We're a think tank with both a C3 and C4 side, and I firmly have my C4 hat on today. And we like to say that we are the think tank of the resistance, arming activists, both new and old, with the tools and the ideas and the messaging and everything one-stop shop that they can be effective, informed citizens and hopefully effective, informed voters.
It feels like every cycle things are changing so much, especially in the digital space. In your opinion, in 2018, what's the, how are voters becoming voters? What's the entry point for the voter life cycle?
So I think we might actually have two very different answers to that, because we have two very different universes of voters that we're courting. But one of the really interesting things that we've seen at CAP through 2017 is that people are becoming engaged in the political conversation so much earlier than before. You see that from people who are marching, people who are joining local organizing groups. We've seen a much earlier entry into the political conversation in the political space. And so one thing that we've thought about is how to meet folks where they are, how to capitalize on that, and how to give them the tools they need to stay in the conversation. And that can be anything from RSVPing to a March event on Facebook, to joining a text group with other folks of your background in your community and talking about issues that you see going on every day in the news. So I think the digital conversation has really started well before anyone even thinks about being a voter, but rather just how they're processing and reacting to the news of the day.
Right. I think that's definitely one part of it. And I would say that the part that we really focus on, and the part that has been most effective for us, is those local issues. So you can't really control the national narrative, and you can't really control whatever somebody's going to say in DC or elsewhere, but you can control what the issues, and you can control what you focus on in terms of the issues that you are talking about as an entity. So when we're out there supporting these candidates and making sure that the voters know what they are doing on those local issues that affect those communities. In California, that's the drought. In Pennsylvania, it's the economy and it's jobs, and making sure that voters and people really, and people who are maybe a little inclined, and our data indicates that they maybe should or would care about this, whether they're involved in infrastructure in California, or they work with the Army Corps of Engineers in Pennsylvania. So being creative with that targeting and bringing them into the fold and letting them know what their representative is doing to advance the issues that they really do care about most, because it's what affects them in their every single day life and their livelihood and their families.
So once someone's been targeted and now they're sharing Facebook posts and they're engaged in the online dialogue of a campaign, what gets somebody to be an online activist but take then offline action? What's the impetus in the voter life cycle, in your opinion, that causes that?
I think that's probably the $1,000,000 question, and if I had a foolproof plan for getting someone to do that every time, I would be pretty rich. But I think voters want options. You see candidates that are, candidates that succeed are ones who aren't just posting their message of the day and leaving it. They're holding Facebook Live Q&As. They're asking people for their opinions, soliciting feedback on things. At CAP, what we find is really effective for folks who want to get involved in the resistance is offering them toolkits, saying, here's what you can do this week. You can go make 5 calls to your representatives. You can show up at a town hall. Here's 5 questions you might want to ask. Like, if you're interested in this, then if you're interested in X, then do Y. So I think it's really about choice to be able to get a voter's attention and someone's buy-in, as opposed to just bombarding them with more content that they see all day long.
I would really agree with that, and I think it's been echoed here a lot today, and I want to just reiterate that in terms of mobilization and taking that online versus offline, it really is that frequency and pushing that message continuously and making sure that you're starting early and investing early and looking for people in places that you might not think that they are.
And I think another thing that we've seen is that, and you know, I work at a think tank, an issue-based organization, so it's a little sacrilegious to say this, but people are not motivated as much by issues as they are by identity. Like, people care about healthcare because they know it deals, it affects their family and their community and people like that they fundamentally identify with, not because they wake up in the morning and think like, a policy is something that I am super passionate on just because it makes sense, right? It makes sense because it affects them.
Premiums increasing, and they see, or they see somebody's healthcare getting taken away, and all of these predictions, and that's what makes them care. Yeah. Totally.
So I think connecting anything you want to do to making someone feel a part of a group, to feel a part of a community that cares, to feel a part of an organization that cares about them is a way to get them in as well.
So this next question is one I get asked a lot, usually from people who care about me, and like my parents or my girlfriend, people who are like, what are you doing with your life, Phil? Is political advertising more or less effective in the digital era? How has it changed since the advent of social media, and are people more or less persuaded by the craft of political professionals?
Well, I don't think I would be a digital director if I would
That's right, Mom.
Less effective. No, it's definitely more effective. I mean, we have so many more opportunities at such a lesser cost to reach so many more people. Earlier, more often, the stat that we all love is that people have to see something 7 times to be able to recall it from memory. And you can do that with a 7 times a week frequency or 5 times a week frequency over a 45-day flight, anything like that. There are opportunities, and was there a second part of that question?
Just, are they more or less persuaded?
So that's up to you, right, as the advertiser. But if you want to persuade them, I think that there's a lot of data out there that shows you there's a pretty clear-cut way to do so, hopefully, and you measure your effectiveness within those campaign flights, and you switch and you tweak as the metrics show you need to. And you test, always be testing, ABT.
And I think we in DC and we in this industry probably are a little bit more cynical, and we see this stuff all day long. We can't possibly think that people are still listening to it, but the average person is, like, they care, they like this stuff. A lot of them, they're ready to receive the message, and I don't think it's over yet. Just because our parents are like, what is it that you do again?
I Google for the Republicans, according to my Nana. What are key indicators in the digital space that reveal whether a strategy is positively or negatively influencing your target universe?
There are so many, but I would say just those really key performance indicators, your view-through rate, your engagement, vanity metrics maybe not so much, but really the way people are responding to your content. I love vanity metrics personally, but really as an advertiser and as somebody who is spending money on these messages and making sure that they are as effective as possible. And then you have things that are like brand lifts, and you have ad recall lifts, and all of those things. And what was just said about the rolling surveys, we constantly do that, always making sure that we are moving the needle in a way that is impactful.
I'm a comms person, so I assume it's the metric I care about is whether or not you get ratioed on Twitter.
That's a good one.
It's fair.
I'll leave it to the professionals.
No, one of you, when we were discussing this panel, you had an interesting metric. I forget which one of you spoke up about, what was it? It was about most share on Twitter.
Okay, so I personally, when we were speaking about this conference call, preparing for the panel, I have a personal belief, it is not scientifically proven whatsoever, that
But she's always right.
it hasn't been wrong yet. So that the candidate if you go for the 24 to 48 hours before the polls open on election day, and on election day itself even, and you go and you look between the two candidates, which one has the most engagements on their Facebooks and Twitter, the one that every single time it's been a contentious race, whenever I go and look, the one with the highest engagement is the one who's won. So, but I think that really does speak to a larger, you don't get all those high engagements and those high reactions by not being active. So investing in those audiences, building those audiences, making sure that you're keeping them captivated, making sure that you are consistently messaging to them, whether it be through email. I mean, we all have the same data universes, so you're knocking on those doors, you're talking to them, you're calling their houses, and on election day, you see where they are, because they are so invested at this point that they're like, yeah, I'm voting for this person, and here's why, and you should too, all of my Facebook friends. So, and changing their profile pictures and that whole thing, so.
Yeah, my background is in Virginia politics, like I know you've heard from many folks in that space today. And I worked on state legislative races in the 2015 cycle, and then watched closely the state legislative races last year. And we would be lucky in 2015 if anyone knew the Twitter handle of our top 5 targets. We would be like, oh my God, someone tweeted at us, this is a great day. And to wake up on election day and see just the incredible amount of people, I'm out in the rain voting for Deborah Rodman, I'm out in the rain doing this and that. I think it's something that you can't discount, the fact that people, think things like that, especially 48 to 24 hours out from the election day.
Totally. The one caveat to that was Jon Ossoff. But if you had to go and look, I would bet that the majority of his engagements were not from the district. So if anybody would follow Georgia 6. But
did AAN follow Georgia 6?
CLF did extensively. We played heavily in it, and we were really excited. It was a fun election. It was a big learning experience for a lot of us, but we won, so.
When thinking about the life cycle of a voter, what's the one element of digital media that has the most impact specifically on vote choice?
I don't think there is a silver bullet, honestly, but starting as early as you possibly can. Honestly, as soon as we know that there is going to be a special election, or we know that there is a candidate that the Democrats are kind of coalescing around, buying those domain names, that's pretty, I don't want to give a page out of our playbook, but that's pretty common practice. And making sure that we are starting as early as possible, running the most effective ads that we can to the most key universe, the most important universes, that the independents, the moderates, the people who will probably decide the election come election day, and when absentee ballots start coming in. So I would say reach and frequency and exposure are what I would invest in.
And for our part of the voter life cycle, which is a bit earlier than when you've identified a candidate or campaign that you're getting behind, just anything that's an organizational tool. Don't sleep on the organizational tools. Don't sleep on the Facebook events, the group texts, the Facebook groups. This is where we're finding folks that want to talk to us. This is where we're finding folks who are sharing, progressive messaging, progressive policy ideas. These things are a huge foundation for folks to take that first step into the activism space. So if you know where they are and you know what they're up to in those areas, then you can communicate with them down the further, more matured stages of their voter cycle. But you're missing those people if you don't know who's out there, who's organizing, who's who's responding to indivisible group events and showing up and meeting with folks.
Totally. I would just say one thing on that is with tax reform, I mean, we are doing so much to make sure that these members who voted for it, and it was maybe controversial in their districts, that these voters know that what their members voted for was lower taxes, was a stronger economy, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not really from the CLF side, it's the AAN side to make sure that these voters know that when their paychecks are bigger in February, it's because of their representative and their representative's vote, or on the contrary, their representative who didn't vote for it and wasn't supportive of all of these wonderful things that tax reform will give all of us, right? So
makes sense. This is something I struggle with a lot. While the data and strategies driving campaigns are clearly becoming more sophisticated every day, are digital media tactics dumbing down messages and thereby dumbing down voters?
I don't think so. I think they're making messages more relevant. I think they're making them easier to digest, easier to share. Coming from a complex policy organization, like, it doesn't matter if we have the best policy in the world if someone who's a busy mother of three can't, read it on the line to get her kids from school. Like, it doesn't. I don't think there's a
even though a tweet is simpler than a white paper.
I think there's a time and place for both.
More accessible, right?
It's more accessible, right? If you like the tweet, if you're interested in it, you can read our white paper. We don't expect everyone to read every 60-page report that comes out of CAP, but if we can distill it into the key points and get that to a voter, like, I don't have a problem with that.
And I would say maybe not dumbing down the message, but really simplifying it.
Yeah.
So we talked about the effectiveness earlier of simple ads and how those are more effective. And it doesn't have to be this amazing $50,000 or $100,000 production of on-location shoot, It can be in the conference room of the RNC in a 25-minute scribble. And just making sure that you're there and you are relevant and they're real time, right? So the way that people react in emails and fundraising emails, we need to be doing that with our messaging. So I wouldn't say it's dumbing it down, it's simplifying it.
Cool. That's what I got.
Hi, Joe Mandisi from Media Post. So Erica, I was struck by your measure of Facebook and Twitter engagements as the new exit polling.
It hasn't let me down. I don't know. It started in 2016. So
my question is, are you looking at any other dark web or other alternative platforms to get an indicator like 4chan or Reddit or other things? And have you found any other correlation with non-traditional communities like that?
So no, but I would never discount it. I mean, Reddit and especially like MAGA, that whole universe is so indicative of how excited people are and what that base is feeling. All you have to do is read the hashtag MAGA, like click on it on Twitter, and you will see what they're thinking. And it's so clear. And when you see his favorability and unfavorability rise and fall with the base, I mean, what they're thinking in their messages of that pro-Trump universe on Twitter and Facebook it's right there for you. You don't have to guess what they're thinking or how they're reacting. On the flip side, I mean, also with it's also not scientific, but so Reddit is a fantastic platform. The Donald, I don't know if anybody else follows it or reads it, but it's a great way to pick the brain of a Trump voter and what the Republican, and I'm sure that Reddit has one, the majority of Reddit is the resistance, right? But just kind of getting a feel, and also if you want to know what they're going to respond to on Facebook, whatever Hannity was talking about the night before is whatever's going to get the most engagement. Was that what you said?
It's all about Fox Primetime.
All about it. We talked about that. I said, somebody told me that recently, and it's so true. But it was him who told me. So. He told me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of these, we're again, we're trying to meet people where they are. If they're on Reddit, great. 4chan tends to not be as relevant to like happy progressive organizing events, and we sort of look there more for what the Russian bots are doing. But you know, there's a time and place for everything.
Fair. But earlier, who was it that was talking about putting content on the Democrats.com or something? But stuff like that, just really non-traditional and not super by the book, but being creative, thinking outside the box, and meeting people where they are.
It sounds as if, from a few things we've heard this morning, including some of the things that you guys are talking about, that I mean, one of the things that we may have learned, lesson from the last cycle, especially Trump's election, is how important identification is. And that's happened among voters, and that's one of the paths to discovery and voting. And social media is, of course, that channel where identification has become one of the currencies. Social influencers, obviously, for brand marketers, they're using social influencers rather than themselves to promote products. What are you discovering about this role of personal identification? I think we heard it in the previous panel about the Hillary and her cards, right, and the woman card. That idea, that sort of tangible identification with a candidate, with a cause, MAGA, the red caps, and that social media seems to be, the rise of social media and the ways in which we're relating to brands now too, seems to be running a parallel course. Are you seeing any of that, or are you leveraging it in any way?
Yeah, I mean, we have shirts that say resist on them. Like, people identify with their resistance. It's what I was talking about earlier with identities and communities. People want to be a part of something. They want to be a part of a tribe that recognizes them and recognizes that they have something in common. So we definitely try to work with that and leverage that.
I would say in my current role, it's really more against so far as opposed to for something. So in opposing John Ossoff or opposing Rob Quist, you are showing your loyalty to making America great again. And if it's not making America great again, it's improving Montana. It's giving Montana the conservative leadership that it deserves, et cetera, et cetera. I would say that that's probably the simplistic way to look at it, but it's true. So.
Phil, panel, thank you very much.
Thanks.